My uncle smiled and said, "Your father's company is mine now." I was 19. My dad was dying of cancer, and I was powerless to stop him. 8 years later, I walked into that office as the new CEO. I looked my uncle in the eye and said, "Pack your desk. You're fired." This is how I destroyed everyone who betrayed my family. My name is Nathan. I'm 27 years old. And if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, if you've ever watched helplessly as someone stole everything your family built, and if you've ever sworn that one day you'd get justice no matter how long it took, then you need to hear what happened next. Smash that like button right now, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this is the most calculated, satisfying revenge story I've ever lived through. And trust me, by the end, you're going to feel every second of the payback. Let's begin. To understand how deep this betrayal went, you need to know what my family used to be, or at least what I thought they were. My father's name was Robert Hayes, Rob to his friends, Dad to me. He was 51 years old when everything fell apart, though looking back, the cracks had been forming for years. My dad built his company from nothing, literally nothing. He started Hayes Industrial Manufacturing in a rented garage space when he was 26 years old, fresh out of a failed marriage, with nothing but a welding certification and a dream. For 25 years, he poured everything into that business. 70-hour work weeks, missed birthdays, holidays spent in the shop. But it paid off. By the time I was in high school, Hayes Industrial was pulling in $2.4 million a year in revenue. We manufactured custom parts for construction companies, agricultural equipment manufacturers, and municipal contracts. It wasn't glamorous. It was loud, dirty, hard work, but it was ours, and my dad was proud of it. My uncle David was different. David Hayes was my father's younger brother by 4 years. Where my dad was disciplined and hardworking, David was charming and opportunistic. He drifted through various sales jobs, marketing gigs, and consulting roles that never seemed to last more than 2 years. He had the kind of personality that made him fun at parties, loud, charismatic, always ready with a joke or a story. But beneath the charm was something uglier. David had always resented my father. I didn't see it when I was younger, but looking back, it was obvious. Every family gathering, there'd be these little digs. Comments like, "Must be nice having your own company, Rob. Some of us have to actually work for a living." Or, "Yeah, well, not all of us got lucky like you did." Lucky, as if 25 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice was luck. David's wife, Patricia, was cut from the same cloth. She was a real estate agent who'd spent 15 years talking about the big deals she was always just about to close. She drove a leased BMW, wore designer knockoffs, and had this way of looking down her nose at people while pretending to be supportive. Together, David and Patricia had one son, my cousin, Brandon. Brandon was 2 years older than me, and from the time we were kids, he'd been positioned as the golden child of the extended family. He was athletic, popular, the kind of guy who coasted through life on looks and charm. He played football in high school, dated cheerleaders, and had this effortless confidence that came from never being told no. My dad used to joke that Brandon would make a great salesman someday. He had no idea how right he was. Then there was my mother. My mom, Susan, had been my dad's second wife. They'd met when I was 3, married when I was 5. For years, she played the role of supportive stepmother, but there was always this distance. She'd come from money. Her family owned a chain of furniture stores in the Midwest, and I think she'd always looked at my dad's business as beneath her somehow. She never said it outright, but you could feel it in the way she'd sigh when Dad came home late covered in grease, or the way she'd change the subject when his work came up at dinner parties. Still, we were a family. Dysfunctional, maybe, but a family. Until everything shattered. I was 19 years old, starting my second year at State University when I got the call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the library, halfway through a mechanical engineering assignment, when my phone buzzed. Dad's name on the screen. "Hey, what's up?" There was a pause. Too long. When he spoke, his voice sounded tired in a way I'd never heard before. "Nathan, I need you to come home this weekend. There's something we need to talk about." My stomach dropped. "Is everything okay?" Another pause. "Just come home, son." That Saturday, I drove the 3 hours back to our house in Riverside County. My mom met me at the door, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands twisting a tissue to shreds. "Your father's in the living room," she said quietly. I found him sitting in his recliner, staring out the window. He looked smaller somehow, thinner. When he turned to face me, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. "Dad?" He gestured for me to sit. "Nathan, I got some news from the doctor last week." I sat down on the couch, my heart pounding. "It's cancer," he said flatly. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The room tilted. "What does that mean?" "It means it's advanced. It's spread to my liver and lymph nodes. He took a shaky breath. "They're saying 6 months to a year, maybe less." I couldn't process it. This was my dad. He was invincible. He lifted steel beams. He worked 12-hour days without breaking a sweat. How could he be dying? "There has to be something they can do," I said desperately. "Chemo, surgery, something." "There is chemo," he interrupted. "We're going to try. But Nathan, you need to understand. This isn't something we're going to beat. This is about time, making the most of whatever I have left." My mom was crying quietly in the doorway. I wanted to cry too, but I couldn't. I just sat there, numb, as my entire world collapsed. "I'm coming home," I said. "I'm dropping out. I'll help with the business. No," my dad's voice was firm. "You're staying in school. You're finishing your degree. That's non-negotiable." "But Dad—" "Nathan," he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "I built that business for you, for your future. The best thing you can do for me is finish what you started. Promise me." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that none of it mattered if he wasn't there. But I saw the look in his eyes, the desperate need for me to agree. "I promise," I whispered. He nodded, satisfied. Then he sank back into the chair, suddenly looking every one of his 51 years. That was the beginning of the end. My dad started chemotherapy 2 weeks later. The treatments were brutal. He'd come home gray-faced and trembling, barely keeping food down. Within 2 months, he'd lost 20 pounds. Within 2 months, he couldn't work anymore. That's when Uncle David showed up. At first, it seemed like genuine concern. David visited the house almost daily, bringing groceries, offering to help with errands. He'd sit with my dad for hours, talking about the business, asking about clients and contracts. "Don't worry about the company, Rob. I'll keep an eye on things for you. Make sure everything runs smooth." My dad, weak and exhausted from treatment, nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it." Patricia came too, playing the doting sister-in-law. She'd bring casseroles, organize my dad's medications, and hug my mom while whispering reassurances. "We're family," she said. "We take care of each other." I was back at school, driving home every weekend, and I wanted to believe they were helping. I wanted to believe that family actually meant something. But then I started noticing things. The first red flag came during a Sunday dinner 3 months after the diagnosis. I'd driven home for the weekend and walked in to find David, Patricia, and Brandon sitting around our dining room table with stacks of papers spread out. "What's going on?" I asked. David looked up, his expression smooth. "Oh, hey, Nathan. We're just helping your dad organize some business documents, making sure everything is in order." "In order for what?" "Well, in case anything happens. We want to make sure the company's protected." Something about his tone made my skin crawl. "Where's Dad?" "Resting upstairs," my mom said quietly. She looked uncomfortable, her arms wrapped around herself. I went upstairs and found my dad in bed, his face pale, an oxygen tube in his nose. "Dad, what's going on with all those papers downstairs?" He blinked slowly, like he was struggling to focus. "David is helping me set up a trust for the business, in case—" He trailed off. "In case what?" "In case I can't run it anymore." His voice was barely a whisper. "He's family, Nathan. He'll take care of it." Alarm bells were screaming in my head, but I didn't know what to do. I was 19 years old, a college student. I didn't know about trusts or estate planning or corporate law, and my dad trusted his brother. So I said nothing. Over the next month, David's involvement in the business deepened. He started showing up at the shop, talking to employees, meeting with clients. My dad was too sick to notice the details, too weak to ask questions. And then came the day everything changed. I got a call from my mom. Her voice was shaking. "Nathan, you need to come home now." "What happened?" "Your father signed something. Papers David brought. Nathan, I think something is wrong." I broke every speed limit getting there. When I burst through the door, I found my dad propped up in bed, David and Patricia sitting on either side of him, and my mom standing in the corner looking like she might be sick. "What's going on?" I demanded.
David stood up, his expression carefully neutral. "Nathan, your father and I have come to an arrangement. Given his condition, he's decided to transfer operational control of Hayes Industrial to me. Temporarily, of course, until he recovers." "Until he recovers?" My voice came out strangled. "He's not going to recover." My dad flinched. Patricia made a soft, reproachful sound. "Nathan, that's a terrible thing to say." "It's the truth." I turned to my father. "Dad, what did you sign?" He looked at me with exhausted, pain-filled eyes. "It's just temporary, son. David's going to manage things while I'm sick. It's the right thing to do." "Show me the papers." David's smile tightened. "That's between your father and me. Family business." "I'm family." David exchanged a look with Patricia. "Nathan, you're 19 years old. You're in college. You don't know the first thing about running a company. Your father needs someone experienced to step in, and that's me. This is what's best for everyone." I looked at my mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my dad. He just looked tired, so tired. "Dad, please," I said quietly, "don't do this." "It's already done," David said. "The papers are signed. I take over as acting CEO on Monday." Something cold settled in my chest. "What about after? After, Dad?" I couldn't finish the sentence. "After your father passes," Patricia said gently, "the company will continue under David's management. It's what Rob wants. He knows David will take care of everything." "That's not what I asked. What happens to the company? Does it go to me?" David's expression hardened just slightly. "Nathan, your father and I have agreed that the company will remain under my control. You'll be taken care of, naturally. There'll be a small trust fund set up for your education and living expenses. But the business itself? That stays with me, someone who actually knows how to run it." The words hit me like a punch. "You're stealing it. You're stealing Dad's company." "Watch your mouth," Dave snapped. "I'm helping your father in his time of need. Don't you dare accuse me of—" "It's okay, Dave," my dad said weakly. He looked at me. "Nathan, I need you to trust me on this. David's family. He'll do right by us. And you're going to finish school, get your degree, and build your own life. That's what I want for you." I stood there, shaking with anger and helplessness. I wanted to argue. I wanted to fight. But what could I do? I was a 19-year-old college student. I had no money, no legal knowledge, no power. And my dad, the one person who could have stopped this, was too sick to see what was really happening. David put a hand on my shoulder. I jerked away. "I know this is hard," he said with false sympathy, "but you'll understand someday. This is what's best." I looked at each of them. David, already mentally counting his money. Patricia, playing the concerned aunt while calculating what they'd gained. My mom, complicit in her silence. And my dad, too weak and trusting to see the vultures circling. "I'm going back to school," I said flatly. "Nathan," my mom started. "I have nothing else to say." I walked out of that house with rage burning in my chest. But more than rage, I felt something else, something cold and calculating. A promise I made to myself in that moment. One day I would take back everything they stole, no matter how long it took. My father died 4 months later. I was there, holding his hand as his breathing slowed and finally stopped. In those final hours, he was barely conscious, the cancer and morphine pulling him under. But there was one moment, just before the end, when his eyes focused on me with sudden clarity. "Nathan, I'm sorry. I should have seen." "Shh, Dad, it's okay." "No." His grip on my hand tightened with surprising strength. "David, I think I made a mistake." Those were the last coherent words he ever spoke. 30 minutes later, he was gone. The funeral was 3 days later. It rained, one of those cold, miserable spring rains that soaks through everything. David gave a eulogy about what a great brother Rob had been, how proud he was to carry on his legacy. I sat in the front row, staring at the casket, and felt nothing but emptiness. After the service, as people milled around offering condolences, David pulled me aside. "Nathan, we need to talk about your future." "My future?" "Your dad set up a trust fund for you, $25,000 for college expenses. It's yours, free and clear." $25,000 out of a company worth $2.4 million. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the expensive suit he was wearing, at the Rolex on his wrist that I'd never seen before, at the barely concealed smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "And the company?" I asked. "The company stays with me, like we discussed. Your father wanted it that way." "Did he?" David's expression hardened. "Are you questioning your father's final wishes?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I knew exactly what he'd done, how he'd manipulated a dying man who couldn't think straight anymore. But I had no proof, no evidence, nothing but a 19-year-old's word against a grieving brother who just inherited a multi-million-dollar business. So instead, I just nodded. "I see." "Good," David clapped me on the shoulder. "Focus on school, Nathan. Make something of yourself. Your dad would want that." He walked away, Patricia on his arm, both of them already looking like they owned the world. Brandon approached me next, his expression a mix of pity and superiority. "Hey man, sorry about your dad. That's rough." "Thanks. Look, I know things are tight for you right now. If you need any help, finding a job or whatever, just let me know. My dad's got connections." The condescension dripped from every word. Brandon had never worked a real day in his life, coasting through community college on his parents' money, and now he was offering to help me? I forced a smile. "I'll keep that in mind." My mom was the last to approach. She looked uncomfortable, guilty even. "Nathan, I know you're upset." "Upset?" I laughed bitterly. "Mom, they stole Dad's company. It's not that simple. David was helping. Your father wanted. Dad was dying. He couldn't think straight. The medication, the pain. He didn't know what he was signing." She flinched. "What was I supposed to do? I'm not a businesswoman. I don't know anything about manufacturing, or you could have protected him. You could have called a lawyer. You could have done anything except stand there and let it happen." Tears welled in her eyes.
I'm still your mother. Are you? The words came out colder than I intended, because a mother would have fought for her husband. A mother would have protected what he built for her son. You just gave up. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Mom. I turned away from her. I'm going back to school. Don't call me unless it's important. I left the cemetery that day with nothing but the clothes on my back, $25,000 in a trust fund, and a burning determination that would define the next 8 years of my life. I went back to school, but I wasn't the same person anymore. The grief, the rage, the betrayal, it all crystallized into something focused and sharp. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. Mechanical engineering became my major, but I added business classes, finance classes, anything that would teach me how companies worked, how they were run, how they could be taken over. I graduated in 3 years instead of 4, summa cum laude, with a double major in mechanical engineering and business administration. I used part of that trust fund for tuition, living on rice and beans in a tiny apartment, working 2 part-time jobs to cover what the trust didn't. Every penny I saved went into a separate account, an account I called the Revenge Fund, even if it was just in my head. After graduation, I had offers from several good companies. Instead, I took a job at a small manufacturing firm in Ohio. It paid less than the other offers, but it was perfect for what I needed. I learned everything: production schedules, inventory management, client relations, contract negotiations. I worked 70, 80-hour weeks, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. My boss, a 60-year-old man named Tom Richardson, took me under his wing one night after everyone else had gone home. "You've got hunger," he told me. "I can see it in your eyes. What are you running from, kid?" "Not running from, running toward." He nodded like he understood. Tom taught me things you can't learn in school. How to read a balance sheet and find the lies hidden in the numbers. How to spot a company in trouble before anyone else does. How to identify the weak points in an organization. How to be patient. 3 years into my job, Tom called me into his office. "Nathan, I'm retiring next year. I want you to take over as operations manager." I was 25 years old. It was an incredible opportunity. "I'm honored, Tom, but I need to ask you something first. If I wanted to buy a company, a manufacturing company, what would I need?" Tom leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You'd need capital, at least 20% of the purchase price in cash. You'd need a solid business plan to get a bank loan for the rest. You'd convince the seller you're worth betting on. And most importantly, you'd need to find a company that's willing to sell." He paused. "You thinking about buying someone out?" "Maybe," I said carefully. "There's a company back in California, one I've been keeping an eye on." "Personal?" "Very." Tom nodded slowly. "Then you better make damn sure you're ready when the time comes, because you only get one shot at something like this. You miss, and they'll never let you close again." I won't miss. And I didn't. For the next 2 years, I worked like a man possessed. I took the operations manager position and turned the company's profit margin from 12% to 18% in my first year. I made connections with suppliers, with clients, with bankers and investors. I saved every extra dollar I earned. And I watched. From 1,500 miles away, I watched Hayes Industrial Manufacturing like a hawk. David had taken over as CEO, just as he'd planned. The first year, the company's revenue actually went up slightly, riding on the momentum my dad had built. But by the second year, cracks started showing. David wasn't a manufacturer. He was a salesman, a schmoozer, a guy who thought charisma could replace competence. He landed big contracts, but couldn't deliver on time. He cut corners on quality to boost short-term profits. He burned through experienced employees and replaced them with cheaper, less skilled workers. I knew all this because I'd stayed in touch with 2 people from the old crew. Jimmy Martinez, who'd worked as a floor supervisor under my dad for 15 years, and Sarah Chen, the office manager who'd been there since the beginning. They didn't know what I was planning, but they kept me updated on everything happening at the company. "It's fallen apart," Jimmy told me during one of our calls. "David doesn't know what he's doing. We lost the Brennan contract last month because we delivered 3 weeks late. 3 weeks! Your dad would have died all over again if he'd seen it." "How bad is it financially?" "Bad, real bad. Word is they're having trouble making payroll." That was the moment I'd been waiting for. A company in trouble is a company that's vulnerable. I started making calls. I flew out to California on weekends, meeting with potential investors, pitching them on a buyout plan. Some laughed in my face. 27-year-old kid trying to buy a multi-million-dollar company? Ridiculous. But some listened. Tom Richardson gave me a recommendation that opened doors. My track record at the Ohio plant spoke for itself, and I'd saved nearly $80,000 over the past 5 years, every penny accounted for, every sacrifice worth it. I found a private equity firm in San Francisco that specialized in distressed manufacturing companies. They looked at my business plan, looked at Hayes Industrial's declining numbers, and saw the same opportunity I did. We'll back you, the senior partner, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Walsh, told me. But understand the terms. We put up the capital for 60% ownership. You come in as CEO with 30%. The remaining 10% we use to incentivize key employees. You turn this company around in 3 years, we renegotiate, and you can buy us out. You fail, we take over completely, and you're out. That's fine, I said. I won't fail. The hardest part was the approach. I couldn't just call David and tell him I wanted to buy the company. He'd never sell to me out of spite alone. So I had Rebecca's firm make the initial contact. They presented themselves as an investment group interested in acquiring Hayes Industrial. David, desperate for cash and drowning in debt, practically fell over himself taking meetings with them. The negotiations took 3 months. Every week, Rebecca would call with updates. He's asking for $2.2 million. He bought it for nothing and he wants $2.2 million? The audacity! What's it actually worth? With the current trajectory, maybe 1.3. He's run it into the ground. Offer 1.5. Tell him it's a final offer. If he doesn't take it, we walk. 2 weeks later, Rebecca called. He took it. We close in 30 days. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling something I hadn't felt in 8 years. Hope. The closing happened on a Friday in December. I flew out to California, but didn't attend the signing. David still had no idea I was involved. As far as he knew, he was selling to a faceless investment firm and walking away with $1.5 million, which, after paying off the company's debts and his own personal loans that he'd been stupid enough to tie to the business, would leave him with maybe $600,000. A decent sum, but not the fortune he'd imagined. The papers were signed by 5 p.m. At 5:01, Rebecca called me. It's done. You're the CEO of Hayes Industrial Manufacturing. Congratulations, Nathan. Thank you, Rebecca, for everything. Don't thank me yet. You got a hell of a mess to clean up. I'll see you Monday morning. Monday morning. That was when I'd walk into my father's company for the first time in 8 years. That was when David would learn the truth. I spent the weekend at a hotel near the facility, barely sleeping, mentally rehearsing what I'd say. When Monday morning came, I put on my best suit, the one I'd bought specifically for this moment, and drove to the industrial park where Hayes Manufacturing was located. The building looked the same from the outside. Same blue metal siding, same sign with my father's name on it. I sat in the parking lot for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel, remembering the last time I'd been here. I'd been 12 years old, and Dad had brought me to the shop on a Saturday to show me a new piece of equipment. He had been so proud, so full of plans for the future. Someday, Nathan, he'd said, this all will be yours. I got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the receptionist looked up with a polite smile. Can I help you? I'm Nathan Hayes. I'm here to meet with David Hayes. Her smile faltered slightly. Do you have an appointment? No, but I'm the new CEO. I think you'll want to see me. Her eyes widened. Before she could respond, a door opened and David walked out, talking on his cell phone. He was in the middle of a conversation about booking a vacation to Aruba, laughing about how he was finally going to relax after all these years of hard work. Then he saw me. He froze mid-sentence. The color drained from his face. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered on the floor. Hello, Uncle David, I said calmly. We need to talk. He stared at me like a ghost. Nathan? What are you doing here? I work here. Didn't anyone tell you? I'm the new CEO. Majority shareholder, actually. Well, technically, the equity firm I partnered with owns 60%, but I have operational control. They sent you the memo this morning. Did you not read it? His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Behind him, Patricia emerged from an office down the hall. She'd been working as the company's HR director, a position David had created for her, despite her having zero HR experience. When she saw me, her face went white. How? David finally managed. How did you... There's no way you could... Buy the company? I finished. It wasn't easy. Took me 8 years, but I'm patient. I learned that from my dad. You remember him, right? Robert Hayes? The man who built this company from nothing? The man whose trust you betrayed while he was dying? Now wait just a minute, David sputtered, his face going red. I didn't betray anyone. Your father gave me that company. He wanted it to me. Did he? I pulled out a folder from my briefcase. Because I had some lawyers look into those documents you had him sign. Turns out, when someone's on heavy pain medication and sedatives, there are questions about their mental capacity to sign contracts, especially when there's evidence of undue influence. We could have challenged the whole thing in court, gotten it overturned. David's face went from red to purple. Then why didn't you? Because this was better. You paid $1.5 million for a company my dad built to be worth $3 million. Under your management, you destroyed so much value that you had to sell it back for half what you paid. The creditors took most of that. You walked away with scraps. And now I own it.
Not because someone gave it to me, because I earned it. I took a step closer. But here's the really beautiful part, Uncle David. Since I own the company now, I also get to make staffing decisions. So let me be the first to inform you that your position as CEO is terminated effective immediately. You have until the end of the day to clear out your office. You can't do this, Patricia shrieked. This is illegal. We'll sue. You'll do nothing, I said coldly, because if you make any trouble, I'll have my lawyers file suit for the fraudulent acquisition of this company. I have statements from employees about Dad's condition when he signed those papers. I have medical records showing the medications he was on. I have enough evidence to make your life a legal nightmare for the next 5 years. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your personal items and leave quietly. You're going to sign a release agreement stating you won't disparage the company or interfere with its operations, and in exchange, I won't destroy you in court. Do we have an understanding? David looked like he might have a stroke. His fists clenched, his jaw worked, but he could see I wasn't bluffing. After a long moment, he spit. You're just like your father, stubborn, ungrateful. I'm exactly like my father, I interrupted. He built something real, something that mattered, and you tried to steal it because you were too lazy and too incompetent to build anything yourself. But the difference between Dad and me, I saw you coming, and I didn't let you win. By noon, David and Patricia had cleared their offices. They left without saying another word. Patricia in tears, David stone-faced and rigid with barely controlled rage. I watched them load boxes into their car from my new office window. My father's old office, which David had redecorated with expensive furniture and a massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than 3 months of his employees' salaries combined. I sat down in the CEO chair and just breathed for a moment. 8 years. 8 years of planning, sacrifice, relentless focus, and now I was here. But there was still more to do.
Brandon showed up that afternoon. I'd known he would. David had given him a job in sales 2 years ago, despite Brandon having no sales experience and a resume that was mostly blank space and lies. He burst into my office without knocking, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "Running a company," I said calmly, not bothering to look up from the financial reports I was reviewing. "Your dad built this place. You have no right—" "My dad built this place," I corrected, finally meeting his eyes. "Your dad stole it. There's a difference." "That's bullshit, and you know it. Grandpa Rob wanted Dad to have it." "Grandpa Rob." I stood up slowly. "You never called him that when he was alive. You barely spoke to him at family gatherings. But now that it's convenient for your narrative, suddenly he was Grandpa Rob and you're the devoted grandson?" Brandon's jaw clenched. "You're just bitter because you got cut out." "I got robbed by your parents and mine. But I'm not bitter, Brandon. I'm victorious. There's a difference." I walked around the desk. "Now let me tell you how this is going to work. You're fired. Your position has been eliminated. You have until 5 p.m. to collect your things and leave the premises. Security will escort you out." "You can't fire me." "I'm the CEO. I literally just did." Brandon took a step forward, his hands balling into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to hit me. Part of me hoped he would, but then he seemed to think better of it. "My dad's gonna sue you into the ground," he snarled. "He's gonna take everything." "He can try, but he won't, because your dad knows that if he starts a legal fight, I'll bury him. I have documentation of every corner he cut, every safety violation he ignored, every client he defrauded with late deliveries and substandard work. I have enough evidence to keep him in court for the next decade. So please, tell him to bring it on. I'd love the opportunity." Brandon stared at me, and I could see the moment reality crashed down on him. His family had lost, completely and utterly lost. "You're a vindictive bastard," he spat. "No," I said quietly. "I'm my father's son, and I don't forget." He left, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I sat back down and allowed myself a small smile, but it faded quickly, because there was still one more person I needed to deal with. My mother called that evening. I'd been expecting it. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Nathan," her voice was strained. "I heard what happened. David called me. He's very upset." "I imagine he is." "How could you do this to family?" The question hung in the air. How could I? After everything they'd done? "How could I?" I repeated slowly. "Mom, do you remember the day Dad signed those papers? The day David took the company?" Silence. "Do you remember how I begged you to stop it? How I told you something was wrong?" "Nathan, you did nothing. You stood there and watched your husband get manipulated by his own brother. You let David steal everything Dad had built, everything he'd wanted to leave to me. And when I confronted you at the funeral, you made excuses. So don't ask me how I could do this. Ask yourself how you could do what you did." I was scared, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know what to do. I'm not a businesswoman. I didn't understand. You didn't have to understand business, Mom. You just had to care. You just had to protect him. I did care, she insisted. I loved your father. Did you? The question came out harsher than I had intended, because when he needed you most, you chose the easy path. You let David handle everything. And when he died and you got your share of the life insurance and the house, you didn't fight for my inheritance. You just moved on. I heard her crying on the other end of the line. Part of me, the part that was still a child who needed her mother, wanted to comfort her, but the larger part, the part that had grown up alone and angry, felt nothing. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Nathan. I know, but sorry doesn't fix it. Sorry doesn't give me back the 8 years I spent clawing my way back to this point. Sorry doesn't bring Dad back or undo what David did. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said honestly. I don't want anything from you anymore, Mom. I stopped needing you a long time ago. Please don't shut me out. You're all I have left. The plea in her voice was real, and maybe once it would have moved me, but not anymore. You made your choice, I said quietly. You chose to stay silent when it mattered. Now you get to live with that choice, just like I had to live with the consequences of everyone else's choices for the last 8 years. Nathan? Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly as I set the phone down. That conversation was harder than facing David. Cutting off your mother, even one who had failed you, leaves a wound. But it was necessary. I'd learned the hard way that sometimes the most important thing you can do is walk away from people who've proven they don't deserve a place in your life. The first 6 months of running Hayes Industrial were brutal. David had left the company in worse shape than even I had anticipated. Half the machinery needed repairs or replacement. The employee turnover rate was almost 40%. 3 of our biggest clients had already started looking at competitors because David had burned those relationships so badly. I worked 100-hour weeks. I was at the facility before the sun came up and didn't leave until long after everyone else had gone home. I met with every employee personally, learned their names, their concerns, their ideas for improvement. The old crew, the people who'd worked for my dad, they remembered me. Jimmy Martinez, the floor supervisor, actually cried when I told him I was bringing him back as operations director. Your dad would be so proud, he said, gripping my hand hard enough to hurt. I wish he could see this, I admitted. He can, Jimmy said firmly. Wherever he is, he knows. Sarah Chen, the office manager, had quit 2 years into David's tenure, but agreed to come back when I called her on her first day. I knew David was going to run this place into the ground, she told me on her first day back. But I had no idea you were planning this. How long have you been working towards this? Since the day of Dad's funeral, I said. She looked at me with something like awe. 8 years of planning? That's dedication. That's revenge, but also justice, I corrected. Within a year, we'd turned things around. I'd renegotiated the supplier contracts David had bungled. I'd personally visited every client we'd lost and convinced most of them to give us another chance. I'd invested in new equipment and training for the workforce. The company that had been hemorrhaging money under David's management posted a profit in my first full year. Not a huge profit, but enough to prove we were viable. Rebecca Walsh and the equity firm were impressed. You've exceeded every projection we had, she told me during our quarterly review. At this rate, you'll be able to buy us out in 2 years instead of 3. That's the plan. And I did. 26 months after taking over, I bought out the equity firm's 60% stake, using a combination of the company's profits, a business loan, and the remainder of my personal savings. At 29 years old, I became the sole owner of Hayes Industrial Manufacturing. The first thing I did was restore my father's name to prominence. I had a memorial plaque made and mounted in the main entrance. Robert Hayes, founder, 1974 to 2025, a man who built something lasting. I stood in front of it the day it was installed, and for the first time in 8 years, I let myself cry. Not from sadness, but from relief. I did it. I took back what was ours. Life had a strange way of coming full circle. 2 years after I bought out the equity firm, I was at an industry conference in Los Angeles when I ran into Brandon. He was working a booth for some third-rate equipment supplier, handing out brochures and looking like he had aged 20 years. When our eyes met across the convention floor, he quickly looked away, but I walked over. Brandon. He turned reluctantly. Nathan? Up close, I could see the toll the last few years had taken. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by an ill-fitting suit that had seen better days. His confident swagger had been replaced by the hunched shoulders of someone who'd been beaten down by life. Have you been? I asked, not unkindly. Fine, he said shortly. You? Good. Company's doing well. We just landed a $10 million contract with Morrison Construction, biggest deal in company history. I wasn't bragging, just stating facts, but I saw him wince. That's great, he managed. How are your parents? His jaw tightened. Dad's working as a consultant, Mom's selling houses again. They're getting by. Getting by. The phrase spoke volumes. The money from the sale had run out faster than they had expected. Turns out, when you've never learned how to manage wealth, you don't keep it long. And you? I asked. Sales, apparently? Yeah. He looked down at the brochures in his hand. It pays the bills. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then Brandon said, "Look, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but what you did was pretty impressive. Taking over the company, turning it around. My dad used to say you'd never amount to anything without him. I know he did. He was wrong." The admission seemed to cost him something. "You proved everyone wrong." I studied him for a moment. Brandon wasn't a bad person, not really. He'd just been raised by people who taught him that the world owed him something, that success was a birthright rather than something earned. In a way, he was as much a victim of David's character as I had been. "Thanks," I said. "For what it's worth, I never hated you, Brandon. I hated what your parents did, what they took from my family." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know the whole story back then. I was young and stupid, and I believed my dad's version of events. But I've had time to think about it. About your dad getting sick, about how my parents swooped in. It wasn't right." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." "If I could go back—" "You can't," I interrupted gently. "None of us can. We just have to live with the choices we made and try to be better going forward." Brandon met my eyes. "Are you happy with how everything turned out?" Was I happy? I thought about it. I'd achieved everything I set out to do. I'd reclaimed my father's company. I'd proven everyone who doubted me wrong. I'd built a successful business and employed over 100 people. But happiness? That was more complicated. "I'm satisfied," I said finally. "I did what I needed to do. Whether that's the same as happy, I'm still figuring that out." Brandon nodded like he understood. We talked for a few more minutes before parting ways. As I walked back through the convention center, I thought about revenge and justice and whether there was really a difference between them. I'd set out to destroy the people who'd wronged me, and in many ways I'd succeeded. David and Patricia had lost their windfall, their status, their easy life. My mother had lost her son. Brandon had lost the future he'd thought was guaranteed. But somewhere along the way, the revenge had become about more than just hurting them. It had become about building something, about proving my father's legacy wasn't just a company that could be stolen, but a set of values and work ethic that could overcome any obstacle. The real victory wasn't that I'd made them lose, it was that I'd made myself win. 3 years after that conference, Hayes Industrial Manufacturing hit $20 million in annual revenue. We'd expanded into 3 new states and employed over 200 people. I'd gotten married to a woman named Rebecca. Yes, the same Rebecca Walsh who'd helped me buy the company. Turns out, spending years working together toward a common goal creates a pretty solid foundation for a relationship. We had our first child on the way. I was 33 years old and living a life I couldn't have imagined when I was 19 and watching my father die. One morning, I got a letter. It was from David. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten, which surprised me. David had always been the type to have someone else do his correspondence. It was short. "Nathan, I know I have no right to contact you. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But I'm writing this because I need you to know something. I was wrong about everything. I convinced myself that I deserved that company, that I'd earned it by helping your father when he was sick. But the truth is, I was jealous. Jealous of what Rob had built. Jealous of the respect people gave him. Jealous of the relationship he had with you. When he got sick, I saw an opportunity, and I took it. I told myself I was doing it for my family, but really I was doing it for my ego. I wanted to prove I could be as successful as my brother. Instead, I proved I couldn't. I ran his company into the ground. I burned bridges he'd spent decades building, and I lost everything in the process. You were right to take it back. You were right to fire me. You were right about all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry, for what I did to your father, for what I did to you. I hope you're doing well. I hope the company is thriving, and I hope you found some peace. David." I read the letter 3 times, looking for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. But it seemed genuine. Just a broken man admitting his mistakes too late to fix them. I considered responding, considered telling him that I accepted his apology, that we could move forward. But in the end, I simply filed the letter away. Some wounds go too deep for apologies to heal. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. David had made his choices, I'd made mine, and we both had to live with the consequences. That Christmas Eve, I did something I'd thought about for years. I gathered all the employees at Hayes Industrial Manufacturing for a holiday party at the facility. I'd transformed the main floor with decorations, catered food, and a massive tree in the center. When everyone had arrived and the festivities were in full swing, I called for attention. "I want to thank all of you," I said, standing on a small platform so everyone could see me. "This company was built by my father, Robert Hayes, over 25 years ago. He started with nothing but a dream and a welding torch. He built something real, something that mattered, something that provided for families and contributed to our community. 8 years ago, that company was taken from us, run into the ground by people who didn't understand or respect what it took to build it. But because of you, because of your dedication and hard work, we've not only recovered, we've thrived. This year, we'll do $20 million in revenue. We've expanded into 3 new states. We've earned back the trust of clients who'd written us off, and we've proven that hard work and integrity still matter." I paused, looking around at the faces of people I'd come to know and respect over the past few years. My father used to say that a company isn't just about profits, it's about people, about building something together that's bigger than any one person. I didn't understand that when I was younger, but I do now. So tonight, I want to announce something. Every employee here is receiving a Christmas bonus equal to 5% of your annual salary. Additionally, we're implementing a profit-sharing program starting next year. When this company does well, you do well. Because you're not just employees, you're part of the family my father started building decades ago. The room erupted in applause and cheers. I saw grown men wiping tears from their eyes. Sarah Chen was outright sobbing. Jimmy Martinez gave me a bear hug that nearly cracked my ribs. As the party continued, I stepped outside for some air. The California winter was mild, the night clear. I looked up at the stars and thought about my father.
"I did it, Dad," I whispered. "I got it back, and I'm going to take care of it the way you would have. I promise." I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to find Rebecca standing there, her other hand resting on her pregnant belly. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, pulling her close. "For the first time in a long time, I really am." She smiled. "Your dad would be proud of you, not just for getting the company back, but for what you've done with it, for the man you've become." "I hope so. I know so." We stood there together, looking up at the stars, and I realized something. The revenge was complete. The company was mine. The people who'd wronged me had faced consequences. But more importantly, I'd built something that mattered. I'd honored my father's legacy, not just by reclaiming what was stolen, but by proving that the values he'd taught me, hard work, integrity, persistence, were more powerful than any betrayal. The story could have ended there. It probably should have. But life has a way of adding one more chapter when you least expect it. 6 months later, I received a call from a hospital in Sacramento. My mother was sick, stage 3 breast cancer. She'd been diagnosed 6 months ago, but hadn't told anyone, hadn't sought treatment until it was almost too late. The nurse who called said she'd listed me as her emergency contact, said she'd been asking for me. I sat in my office for a long time after that call, staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to ignore it. She'd made her choices. She'd stood by while my father was manipulated. She'd chosen comfort over courage. But then I thought about what Rebecca had said, about the man I'd become, and I realized that part of being that man meant not letting bitterness define me forever. I drove to Sacramento the next day, found my mother in a sterile hospital room, looking small and fragile in the bed, her hair gone from chemotherapy, her skin gray. She looked up when I walked in, and her eyes filled with tears. "Nathan," she whispered, "you came." "I came," I confirmed, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Scared." She reached for my hand. I hesitated, then took it. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to know. I'm sorry for failing you, for failing your father. I was weak when I should have been strong." "I know," I said quietly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I needed to see you, to tell you that watching what you've done with the company, hearing about your success, it's made me proud. Your father would be so proud." The words broke something in me, some wall I'd been maintaining for years. "He loved you," I said. "Even at the end, even through everything, Dad loved you. He told me to take care of you." "And I told you to hate me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "No, you didn't tell me to do anything. You just gave up, and I couldn't forgive that. Maybe I still can't. But you're my mother, and you're sick, so I'm here."
We talked for hours that day, really talked for the first time in years. She told me about the guilt she'd carried, about how she'd known what David was doing, but convinced herself it wasn't her place to interfere, about how after my father died, she'd been too ashamed to reach out to me, about how she'd watched my success from a distance, wanting to be part of it, but knowing she'd forfeited that right. I told her about the last 8 years, about the loneliness and the determination, about meeting Rebecca, about the baby on the way, about how I'd found a way to turn anger into purpose. "You're stronger than I ever was," she said, "than both your father and I combined. You got his determination, and, well, you got the strength I never had. I got it from surviving, from having no choice but to be strong. Will you forgive me, someday?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe, but even if I can't, I won't abandon you. You're still my mother, and you're sick, so I'll be here. I'll help you through this, but I can't promise more than that." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "That's more than I deserve." My mother survived the cancer. The treatment was brutal, but she was tougher than I'd given her credit for. I visited her twice a week during her recovery, brought Rebecca to meet her, eventually brought our daughter to meet her grandmother. Our relationship would never be what it was before my father's death. Too much had happened, too much trust had been broken. But we found a careful peace, a way to coexist in each other's lives without pretending the past didn't happen. David and Patricia, I never heard from again after that letter. Brandon sent a card when our daughter was born, just a simple congratulations with no return address. I appreciated the gesture. Hayes Industrial continued to grow. We hit $30 million in revenue by my 35th birthday, expanded into 6 states, employed over 400 people. I was featured in a manufacturing industry magazine with the headline, "The Legacy Builder," how Nathan Hayes reclaimed his father's dream. When the reporter asked me about taking over the company from my uncle, I kept it vague. It was a complicated family situation, but ultimately I felt a responsibility to honor what my father had built, to prove that his vision was worth fighting for. "Do you consider yourself a successful businessman?" she asked. I thought about the question, about 19-year-old me watching my father die and feeling powerless, about the 8 years of relentless work and planning, about the moment I'd walked into that building as CEO, about every choice I'd made since. "I consider myself my father's son," I said finally, "and I hope that wherever he is, he knows that his legacy isn't just a company. It's the lesson that some things are worth fighting for, no matter how long it takes." The article ran with a photo of me standing in front of the memorial plaque I'd installed. Robert Hayes, founder, a man who built something lasting. That's how I want this story to end. Not with my uncle's downfall or my mother's regrets or even my own success, but with my father's legacy, the real one, the one that taught me that when someone tries to take what's yours, when they betray you at your lowest moment, when they count on you being too weak or too broken to fight back, you have 2 choices. You can let them win, or you can spend every day, every hour, every ounce of energy you have proving them wrong. I chose to prove them wrong, and 8 years later, standing in the company my father built, surrounded by people who believed in what we were building together, I finally understood what he'd been trying to teach me all along. Success isn't about how much money you make or how many people you defeat. It's about knowing who you are and what you stand for, and refusing to let anyone take that away from you. My uncle stole a company, but he couldn't steal my father's legacy, because that legacy lived in me, and I made damn sure it survived. So that's my story. 8 years of planning, sacrifice, and relentless determination to take back what was stolen from my family. Was it revenge? Absolutely. Was it justice? I'd like to think so. My Uncle David tried to build his fortune on my father's deathbed. Instead, he lost everything, and I gained more than just a company. I gained the knowledge that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible, that patience and strategy can overcome even the deepest betrayal, and that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's proving that you're everything they said you'd never be. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been told you're not good enough, if you've ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours, hit that like button right now. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought for 8 years to get revenge, or would you have walked away? I read every comment, and I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and remember, they can defeat you if you let them. Never let them.